Welcome to Insights in Sound, where we talk to the people behind the scenes, behind the technology, and behind the music. People you may not know, but you should. And please check out getitInWriting.net/shows for a full list of our podcast YouTube series.
My guest is Todd Urban. He is a musician, engineer, producer, studio owner, educator, product manager, and all that just before breakfast. You definitely do wear a lot of hats. So maybe we should start with that. Just what about a little bit of background on how you got to where you are?
Yeah, wearing a lot of hats. I mean, I thought that was going to turn into a hair joke because part
I'm
of where
saving
I
the dad
am.
jokes for later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Dad
but
jokes,
literally,
you have to slide into the dad jokes. You can't just come out of the gate with a dad joke. It's just then it's all downhill from there. So I'm setting
no,
you up for one later.
that would have been a relevant one. The hair thing. A lot of what where I am now is attributed to the fact that in my earlier days, in my early 20s, I had the opportunity with an investor to open a hair salon. It was actually an Aveda salon, and it was just so great to have the chance to learn how to run a business and learn how to work with customers and learn P&L sheets and everything about a business using someone else's money. That's the best part. I did go to school for business to some extent. I was a jazz performance music management major, where you learn
Wait,
the basics of.
no. That is such an oxymoron, a compound
Yeah,
oxymoron right there. Tell me that again. You were what?
it was a music management track,
Or
undergraduate,
jazz?
with a jazz performance component. And
Okay,
so it was kind of like, yeah, I want to be a
that's
jazz
a joke right
musician.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to be a jazz musician who makes a living, and people go, no, you don't. But it's doesn't work.
Okay.
Um,
Uh-huh.
but yeah, in all seriousness, there was always a split in my life where I knew I wanted to do something on the creative end, but I also knew I didn't want to struggle. I didn't mind working nonstop because I still to this day work nonstop. So do you, so do pretty much all of us in this industry. But it wasn't a matter of the amount of work, but I knew I didn't want to struggle. I knew at the end of the day I wanted to be able to look at myself and say, I did it. I accomplished something. I can survive on my own. And but school can only get you so far, whether it's in performance or whether it's in business or engineering or whatever you do. It's up to you to take it to that next level. And it really took, as I said, that working with opening a hair salon, and then I had some other opportunities after that to work in completely non-related fields, unrelated to music, on the business side to help people get up and running and take a company to profitability. Which to take a company to profitability within 3 years is amazing. My goal was always do it within a year. If you could just break even in a year, you're set. And
Well, it's
so
interesting
that was
you have
kind of my
this.
big story. Yeah.
It's well, first of all, congratulations on that beautiful segue from the hair joke right into that was very well timed. But it's interesting that you have this seemingly from early on this awareness of the whole the left brain right brain thing of I want to be creative, but I also want to eat, and
Mm-hmm.
that is I mean, it's great. It's kind of novel, and I think that for most people, there's almost an internal struggle between those two forces because one is, free spirit, and it's it's that old fable about the ant and the grasshopper. One wants to frolic and be creative, and the other wants to prepare and be organized and everything. So it's interesting that you got that balance so early in life.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was something I was born with. It was something I knew whether it was mowing lawns as a kid or whatever it was. But I even remember my audition tape to get into college. I knew where my level was. I was always realistic. My level was not here with everyone else. My level was here. I actually got into the school. This sounds like a joke, but I got into school on probation. It was like they brought me in and they said, "You're here on probation." It's like school hasn't even started yet, and they hooked me up with Rufus Reed, who's this great bass player, and he said to me, he just walks up to me, he's like, "Walk a blues." I was a bass player, still am a bass player, and I walked what I thought was a blues, and he just kind of looked at me, and goes, "Okay."
Ow.
Not like okay in a good way, okay, like as in like okay, we got some work to do. But the thing is, I was okay with that because I realistically knew where I was level wise, at least to some extent. But the point was going to be, even coming into the school, my audition tape, I went to a top studio. I took the money I saved up as a kid. I paid to make sure I got a great audition tape. It was a cassette tape back then. It was 3 tracks. It was probably live to reel or live to DAT or something like that, and then put it on a cassette and sent it out. But then I took it the next day after sending it out to all the colleges, and I started selling it. I said, this cost me money. Anyone want to help me who's going to school for music? Just, whatever you could contribute. This tape cost me whatever it was, $1. I'm selling it for $5. All right. I probably started at 15 and they probably took me down to 5. But it always had to be that way. It always had to be that balance because I knew where I was level wise. And I never wanted to be here. That's the thing. Even to today, I don't want to be here as a musician. I don't want to be here as an engineer. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that. It's I've always said I never want to be the smartest guy in the room, because then, first of all, you don't have anything to learn, but also you're a target. There's a responsibility that comes with that of, I'm going to be the best. Well, there's always going to be a next best after you, and there's always going to be somebody who's going to play circles around you, whatever thing. And then, it's not a competition. So it makes sense to me to always want to be somewhere in the middle. We can joke about striving for mediocrity and all that, but I think there really is a validity to the idea of being conscious of your abilities, your level, and how to use those in a positive way. But I'm kind of laughing to myself though about this whole, sort of entrepreneurial streak that obviously happened pretty early, and also the whole pragmatic approach of, well, it should cost me money, man. I see what can I do to get my money back.
It will always, yeah. It's no matter what. But it wasn't about chasing the money always. It was. I had somebody turn to me when I was younger. I was probably about 20, and they said, and it was a great bass player. A lot of people may know him, but I'm not going to mention the name. And he said, I always wanted to be one thing. I wanted to be a good bass player. And I'm thinking, this guy's a great bass player. He goes, no, I just want to be I want people to know me as a good bass player. And it took a while for that to settle in. And then I was on a session once, a recording session. I thought I did a great job. And I left the session. I'm like, oh, great, I'm going to be on this track. And then I found out they brought in Kermit Driscoll, who came in and re-recorded all the parts. And they used him, who's a great bass player, worked with Bill Frisell and tons of other people. And I kind of came back and I'm like, well, at least if I'm going to be replaced by somebody great, at least it was a legend on bass. And I said, because he's a legend. And the guy who was engineering turned to me. He goes, you know what it is that people love about Kermit? It's that he makes everybody else sound great. And it was like, boom. It was like that hit you in the gut. Like my playing was great. My part was great. But it was like instant. For the rest of my life, my goal, and this is leading somewhere, whether it's my engineering work or my performance work, I have one major objective, which is to make everyone else sound great. And that's really how I've gotten where I am today. And whether I'm working on products for music companies or doing reviews on my YouTube channel or whatever it is, I have one goal, which is to represent things with integrity and make things sound great.
That's a really wonderful and admirable thing. And I think that's what I've always loved about that is the idea that we are there for the sake of the art. If you're working somehow in a live show or a performance, or if you're in the studio, whatever it is, if you're not the person actually in front of the microphone, then your job is to support that person and get the best performance possible out of that person. And it's a great attitude that we are all cogs in a machine. We're all there for the task of creating something beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that all of the roles that you are talking about playing are collaborative in nature. And
Hmm.
I was I was looking at your bio, and there was another thing that kind of struck me, which was that you had pursued a degree in neuromuscular therapy
It's true. Yeah.
to
Yeah. That.
help to help musicians rehab from injuries.
Yeah, that started with my own injury. When I was an undergrad, when I was doing my undergrad, I was just practicing nonstop, trying to catch up, get out of probation, right? Trying to catch up with to where I should be, and I injured my hands, and I had to first start playing bass correctly. So I started learning classical double bass and learning how to properly perform, and then I switched to piano for a few years, which I still perform on piano as my second instrument. But at the time, I then also had to start figuring out how to heal my body. So it was acupuncture, it was a lot of massage, it was working with chiropractors and anything that could help me. And when I was done and I finally got better, I then said to myself, I need to kind of give back. And so I had an opportunity. I went to a school in South Carolina and started working with dancers and musicians who had injuries. And I even continued that practice when I moved back up to New York. But you know how it is. When you switch areas, sometimes you want to switch your whole life. And so I switched back to a completely different role, which we could get into if we want.
I could give you shit about being an overachiever here, but it's it's interesting that you have taken a lot of little diversions like that,
Mm.
because that's the classic autodidactic maneuver. We see something over there and we decide, oh, that's kind of interesting, and we do that for a while, and it all informs your career in some way or another, but it's never exactly the path you expect it's going to be. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't your intention early on in life to be wearing all these different hats.
Hmm. No. And and I talk about this a lot. I currently teach college too, is one of my hats, and it's an audio engineering program. And I frequently talk to the students about my journey, and not so much to talk about my journey, but the fact that we all have a journey.
Exactly.
And if you think you know where you're going to be, we have a problem. We need to have a sit down. Like if you think you know where you're going to be, even next year, but especially if you think I'm making beats in 20 years or in 30 years I'm going to be doing this. You don't even know what the technology in the industry is going to look like, right? um, Never mind what your interests are or what the opportunities are. So yeah, we talk about this a ton at my school.
Yeah.
What do you want to be?
Yeah.
What's short term? What's long term? And then what's that realistic organic growth?
And I always refer back to that great old saying about we make plans and the universe laughs. I think
Mm.
when we start out, we always have this destination in mind, but there's always this little tangential stuff and things beyond our control and things that are completely unanticipated. As you say, we have no idea not only where the technology is going to be, but where we're going to be in terms of our creativity, in terms of our personal development, our circumstances, and most lifetimes, you have a dozen careers or more if you're really looking at it, because there's so many other little things to chase, and it never ends up where you think it's going to be. And I think the hardest thing for me as a younger person was trying to pay attention to all the other stuff while you think you know where you're going, because you think
Mm.
you're chasing this one particular goal, and all of these other little influences come in, all these other little opportunities come in to try something else, to do something else. And many times we follow them, sometimes we don't, but you never really know where they're going to lead.
Yeah, it's I mean, I feel our objective in the school needs to be a few different things. One is obviously to give them the skill set they need.
Mm-hmm.
I think, but the other is to show them, like, bring them back down to reality. Like, a lot of schools kind of always want to hype up the program, like, this will get you here. I think that's so dangerous. It's like, okay, I think we should say we'll introduce you to this, and then it's you who takes it from there to wherever we go from there.
Well said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the students will learn the techniques. They'll learn the skill set. They'll probably be a better engineer than I am. My concern is, can they do anything with that once they obtain those skill sets?
Well, and I think it's more than just a skill set in that sense, because you're also figuring out how to maneuver in interpersonal relationships. And of course, that's such a big part of working with people. And it also is a big part of networking, and and I hate to use that word because it's so cliche, but it really is true. Most of our work is based around interpersonal relationships. And I think it's important to introduce that as well, an understanding of human nature, human psychology, and how we all interact with each other, because that is a big part of the creative process. It's a big part of the collaborative process, and I think sometimes that's underserved for a lot of people, because they're very, very, as I say, goal oriented, focused on what they think their goal is, and sometimes to the expense of other needed skills.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think students are blown away when they ask me why I'm successful in the areas where I'm successful. And I respond the way I do, which is, you brought up the word collaborative more than once today. And it's funny, before I knew how to position my studio work here where I work, I actually had multiple clients say to me, they would leave and they'd say, this just was such a cool collaborative effort. And like, okay, I thought nothing of it the first 2 or 3 times. And then I was working with somebody else once that was doing a video and asking me questions and on video. And he said to me, he goes, this is all about collaborative work. And so I actually have my kind of tagline on my website is that it's a collaborative workflow through something. I don't actually know what it is, but it's something about being a collaborative.
I forgot it.
Yeah. But it's but the way I actually position my work as an engineer, as a producer, is to look at allowing the artist to open up and have an experience and work together on something, whether it's me helping them to produce, whether it's me helping them to assess their songwriting, whether it's me just working as an engineer and taking a backseat and giving feedback. But it's always this concept of, we're here working together, which is not always the concept with engineers and producers. I mean, producers usually, yes. Engineers, not always. Sometimes they're on a technical level. Not so much anymore, but sometimes. But students are shocked by this. They think it's like, no, I have the most badass mic placement and I know how to EQ this perfectly and get this to sound, in the room sounds amazing. I'm like, none of that matters if the artist doesn't leave feeling I made art, right? None of that matters. And I could at least say all my clients leave here feeling like I made art. Even if they did a bad job, they at least took the step in the direction of achieving their goal, or working on the process to make that art. And that's the way I position my work. And it's so hard for young students to understand that this is equally or more important than all the technical stuff we teach you in school.
Totally agreed. And I think that, I have had many discussions with people about this. My feeling about the role of a producer is that it is entirely collaborative. It has to be. And there are definitely some producers who are more strong in bringing parts of themselves into the production, and good on you if that's the way you do it and it works for that particular, again, it's part of that collaborative process is understanding gaining an understanding of how much of what do I need to contribute, how much is not enough, how much is too much, in what directions. And that's a very, very complex process. And there's a lot of gray area between engineer and producer in that sense. And a lot of engineers do gain the awareness to be a collaborator in the process. And I think that, again, it comes with experience. It comes with, you know, having the opportunity to work with other people, to really be present with other people, understand what's going on, and say, how can we do this? Because you're absolutely right when you say the artist needs to come away feeling like they've created something. And that, to me, the coolest thing ever is to be able to collaborate on a creation. There's a feeling of an accomplishment there that just, there's nothing like it. And it's hard to do if you
Yeah.
think you're there to do this one thing. There needs to be this openness of, okay, let me read the room. Let me see what is needed in this situation. And I think it comes down really to being present.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I still get schooled on this occasionally if I'm aware enough to really think about it. I mean, I could think just last week I was working with an artist in his 70s. He's an old rock and roller. He used to do the bitter end. You're a New Yorker,
All right.
the Monday night jam session or something back in the whatever it was, early 80s, late 70s, or whenever it was. And he's just kind of coming back into the doing some music in his retirement, and we recorded, we worked on an album, I played some parts, it came together, it sounded great, we're all happy, and I give him the rough mix, and I'm like, I'm gonna mix it this week. I send it out to him, and he sends me a text back saying, the mix sounds amazing, it's exactly what I don't want. he goes he goes, you made it absolutely perfect. He goes, but that demo, that rough cut, is what I want. You captured the emotion of us sitting in the room. And that's like the art that I wanted, was what was this process like. He's like, I've made my albums, I don't need to make more albums. I want to capture where I am now, because I only have a few more albums left, or this might be the last one, but and it was like, wow, I completely missed what the intent of this project was. And I had to take a step back and go, okay, cool, it's I need to drop the ego. I need to not worry about every resonant frequency being sculpted out and everything sitting perfect in the mix. That's not what this artist wants. This artist wants to capture when we were sitting here laughing, knocking instruments over, making fun, and that feel like that's him going back to when he was younger, and that's what he wants. He does not want this perfectly refined 2022 mix. That's not where he came from. It's
Well, first of all, I think that's fantastic, and it's a great lesson to have to be reschooled in. I also think it points to the idea that we're all always being schooled.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it's a constant battle. What? There's that great bumper sticker: "Sit, ego, sit." You know, it's.
Yeah.
I mean, I think because we all get so deeply emotionally involved in the
Mm-hmm.
project that maybe sometimes we're not paying enough attention. And
Mm-hmm.
I love the idea that it's a constant journey of being educated. It's a constant journey of being nudged and reminded, hey, look over here, pay attention to this. Because if we're that well versed as artists, which we hope we are, there's going to be so many different things going on. And the creative process it's multidimensional. It's like it's more complicated than playing 3D chess. There's so much going on. And yeah, there's always the possibility that we as human beings will miss something. So I think it's really cool that you had that opportunity to be reminded.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll bet you go back now and you do a mix that is just balls to the wall, raw and energetic and awesome,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
that's now you've got that different perspective. So I know you also do, as you were saying, you do a lot of education.
Mm.
I believe you're a logic guy, in fact, right?
Uh, as in the DAW?
Yes.
Yeah. I use, yeah, I use Logic a lot.
Uh,
I, I do find Logic to, I use Pro Tools a lot, obviously. Uh, Logic to me is, I, I have a master's in, it's actually an education master's, but it's in orchestral arranging to, I'll try to not make this too boring, but basically to take the voices of an orchestra and make them, um, disperse them in a way so that each player gets kind of a diversity within the voices of the orchestra so that they develop properly. But because of that, I do a lot of arranging still and orchestration within a DAW, and Logic is a little more, well, it's a lot more, uh, it's a lot easier to use than something like Pro Tools when you start getting that deep into MIDI editing and virtual instruments, in my opinion. It's also easier to just look section wise and move sections around and things like that.
sure. I mean, I happen to agree
Yeah.
it's a good compositional tool. Um, my question regarding that is, you're teaching you're teaching a generation that you had mentioned earlier about,
Mm.
everybody wanting to make beats, which has been my experience with students as well. Um, there's a different approach to teaching loop based versus linear in
Mm-hmm.
that sense. And how do you reconcile that in your
Mm.
approach?
Uh, yeah, I don't really talk so much about the compositional level of when I'm instructing. I do get into it when students are producing in engineering.
Well, that's what I'm asking. I'm asking more the
Yeah,
technological tie-in to a
yeah,
DAW, and
yeah.
that's
Okay. I mean, the biggest thing, forget about Logic, I would say is Ableton Live.
yes.
When you're taking a look at the session view, and yeah, it's so many of my students and the younger generation gets into this idea of dropping a loop in and just triggering loops. I Now, if you're just looking to make a single beat and have a flow over the top of another instrument or a rapper or whatever, that could work. But typically, there's an evolution to song, and we will discuss that. Like how does the song just start boom right on beat one, or is there any sort of synth swell or some sort of build up or anything? A lot of the times, to answer your question, I will try to have them find reference tracks. What is your reference track? What do you think you're going to sound like? What do you want this to mix like? And they'll pull something up and it's like, okay, is that only one beat? Yes, it is. Is it? We go back and it's like, oh man, there's a pad in the beginning that
Yeah.
goes under the whole thing, and maybe that's just it. There's just a pad intro, and then boom, the beat comes in. But whatever it is, it's rare that it's just that one beat, that one four measure loop or whatever it is. And I
There's
try
a
to bring
build.
that
There's
to their attention.
dynamics. There's
Yeah.
orchestration. There's different stuff that you do in the second verse to make it different from the first. I think that to
Yeah.
me is one of the things that I have found is important to bring out to students or artists who are primarily loop based. Is
Mm-hmm.
the loop is part of a composition. The loop is not the composition. The beat is not the
Yeah.
composition.
I think one of the great tools is to have students or artists or engineers, producers do a transcription of energy throughout the form of the piece.
Mm,
Just don't worry about, we're not even talking necessarily about dynamics. We're definitely not talking about harmony here. We're just talking about where's the energy? Does it start here? Does it go to here? Where does it peak? Is it the end of the song, or is there like something in the middle? Is it a solo? Is it on the bridge? Is it always on the choruses? But just have them map out, and it could just be pencil and paper.
it's a
Just
subjective thing to a certain extent, but yes, I see your point.
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then try and tie it in objectively. Is it because they brought in an orchestra behind them for that one section, or is it just because the lyrics got more aggressive, or the performance of the vocalist became more aggressive? What makes you try to tie that subjective part into the objective part?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Did the second guitar all of a sudden change to a different sound, whatever it was? It's, or different chord structure. It's there's there's this gradual buildup of sorts,
yeah.
and this, as you say, this ebb and flow.
Yeah, but there's another thing. I have with these students that want to just make beats, and I hate when they say I just want to make beats
Yeah.
because to me that means they're like shutting themselves right down from the beginning when you use the word just.
Mm-hmm.
Like is that how you're going to market yourself? What do? I just make beats. Oh yeah, that I want to work with you. But it's like, but you could say I make beats, but don't say I just make beats. But the other thing I think's a challenge is the student that comes up to me and says, I just want to make beats, and you're teaching me how to mic something, or you're teaching me how to EQ something. And I'll say to them, okay, if all you're going to do is sample based music and layer samples, fine. But the fact that you know how to take a microphone and put it in front of an instrument is now in your vocabulary means that when you walk into a studio or work with another producer or work with another artist, you can now communicate on a level that makes you more intelligent or makes people want to talk to you, because you have some sort of idea of what the heck is going on. But if you didn't have any of these skills, you would just be completely blindly walking in with your beat on your flash drive. And that's kind of the end of your process. Here's my beat. It's over. you know,
You
because
used a word that
yeah,
I think is so important, which is vocabulary. There's always that saying about the 10,000 hours, but I think it's in pursuit of the collaborative process. I think there's nothing more important than having a wide and broad vocabulary, and I mean both verbal and musical. I think the ability to not only communicate with people and understand what they want and what is possible, but also to be able to pull ideas out of nowhere, to be able to try
mm-hmm.
something different. Because I think the best collaborations, the happy accidents, happen because not because we're trying to get this particular sound, not because we're trying to get, a John Bonham snare sound, but because, we tried to use an instrument or an effect in a way that was unexpected, or we tried a loop that, was completely off key, like, a piece of a horn section, and we threw it in somewhere and it went, oh, that almost works because it's just atonal enough. Those kind of accidents, I think, synth sound designers say the same thing. I just happened to tweak the knobs to a certain way, and all of a sudden I got this one patch that, you know, I think those kind of possibilities only happen if you're willing to broaden your vocabulary.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's
Yeah,
it's 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 a really good outlook to have, I think. So bravo to you for teaching it to your students, man. Really, seriously.
trying, trying. Yeah.
I want to go into another thing with you because you also do work with manufacturers.
Ah, yeah.
And I've had this conversation. Well, of course, I had this conversation with myself over many years, but I've also had this conversation with a lot of other people. Um, I think a lot of students don't look fondly on the idea of, well, you could go work for a manufacturer.
Mm.
And my experience, I mean, there are some people who feel it all becomes then a sales role. And my experience was more along the lines of product management and being able to contribute something to the next whatever it is, the design of an instrument or the design of a control surface or whatever it is that you are specializing in. And I'm interested in your experience in terms of how you connected with a manufacturer. I know you work with Softtube, just so we're
Mm.
clear on, but I know you've worked with a bunch of other manufacturers as well. What's your outlook on that?
Yeah. I mean, one. I started making videos for YouTube really early on, like way before it was a trend to look for tutorials on YouTube. And my purpose was just, uh, here's Logic. I was using Logic a lot at the time. Here's Logic. Most people don't seem to understand how to get there from Pro Tools. It's kind of a different feeling. Let me show people how to get there. And so I started putting together some really rough like screen captures. I think I may have even filmed my screen with an actual camera at one point.
All right.
You know, big no. And they're horrible. You know, I took them down a long time ago, but they did really well. It was like instant 10,000, 20,000 views. And this is in the early days of YouTube before things were even getting numbers like that. There were very few people. I mean, there was a guy, SF Logic Ninja, David Earl, who is now actually one of the top people over at Logic, who was doing the same thing, and his channel did even better. But at that time, people were then seeking me out and saying, okay, that's great. Like, I found like one of the only video instructions on how to use Logic. Can I take private lessons with you? And I was like, oh, cool. So I started doing that. Fast forward a bit, I was like, oh, there's actually something here. I could actually make money off this. It started off me just doing it to help people, and it turned into actually a way of generating some revenue. And so I started doing some other little product features. I did, synthesizer releases for soft synths and plugins here and there that were released by some companies. One of the big things was Universal Audio with their Apollo. A lot of people just were unclear as to how to use it in their DAW, especially the person who wasn't the pro at the time, just somebody who picked up their first interface, a pro interface, and wanted to get it working with Logic. So I put together a video on that, and that actually turned into almost a business of its own. It was just doing, at the time, Skype interviews or Skype sessions with people on how to just set up your DAW so that you could plug a mic into the back of your Apollo and record into your DAW. And what is this console app that they have that looks like a mixer? How do you use that? Like, what does that do? And so I actually had a separate side business doing that, and I still do a lot of that. Actually, these days I do a lot more like I'm almost on retainer, like an attorney, where a studio will call me up when they get into some technical trouble and just be like, help, everything went down, we updated, what do we do? And it's especially with the M1 Max, everybody went out and was like, oh, we're going to get M1 Max. And then it's like, our interface is no longer connected. And it's like, well, hold on, there's another step, But it's, it all stems from the same thing. It stems from this idea of education, just wanting to help people, wanting to teach people. It wasn't always about the money. It was about just trying to deliver something that was great quality to an audience. And from that came the business opportunities. But yeah, then we could stop there. That could be a pausing point. But from there, I got involved with manufacturers. And you mentioned SoftTube, which is my current role. I work with the company SoftTube. They're a Swedish-based company. We are mostly known for our plugins. We're also known for hardware too, Console 1 fader. And it's been an amazing journey because it's such a, you talked about not being the smartest one in the room. There couldn't be a place that I felt more like the least smart person in the room when you go there. It's a group of really brilliant DSP engineers and even their marketing people. Everybody just has such creative, here comes the word, collaborative input on everything. It's a cultural difference between how they work and how a lot of companies, I think, work, where things are kind of done in segregation and isolation within the company. So that's been really great. And I work mostly in product marketing and some business development there. I make a lot of their video content and work with the teams just on everything from seeing how the products evolve over time and assessing what we're doing moving forward.
So how is that for you in terms of giving input into the development of a product from the seat of the person using it?
That's essential. It's any company is going to have beta testers and and do customer interviews beforehand and do their research, but it's always essential for a company, I think, to have somebody in the company that is still an avid user of the product, as a fan of the product, and not only thinking as a corporate employee, right? When you start just thinking about what's going to be the next big product, it's like that's where it all falls apart. Instead,
that's a kiss of death. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know this. I mean, you've done this way more than I have with way more companies. It's over the years. It's loving what you do is so important. That sounds like a cliche, but I'm talking about from the business side. Loving what you do in that business is so important. Otherwise, you just can't be successful. If I didn't love the products we made, I just wouldn't be good at what I did. I could put the words on the paper, but I couldn't passionately move it forward in the way we do.
Well, it's funny. I have had the experience of listening in on some of these entrepreneurial groups where people are starting their own businesses. And I think it's a wonderful thing. I've been more or less entrepreneurial my whole life. I haven't had too many of what I call normal jobs in that sense. At least, if you consider anything in the music industry normal, but that's another conversation. But I have no, I can't say anything negative about somebody who starts their own business. But when I think about the idea of offers I've gotten to invest in a chain of laundromats or real estate or things like that, these are things, especially something like real estate, that's an art form in itself too. And there are people who are really, really good at it and really smart. And, they're the people you want when you want to deal in real estate. But to me, I think having not just experience, but a passion for these tools, I have a passion for a well-made guitar. I have a passion for a great compressor. It sounds totally geeky, but I think having a passion for the process of making music, for that collaborative process, you bring that to your input for, what are we designing here? Whether we're designing a control surface or whether we're designing a pair of speakers, whatever it is, I think there's a different kind of input that you give if you're really invested in the process as an end user.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't have to just be a manufacturer for the student that knows if that's not really for them. But even on my personal YouTube channel, I have a YouTube channel which is dedicated mostly to, it's not really product reviews. It's more teaching people how to use products. And this past week, I just put one out on the sequential profit. And it was, I think what made it successful was this idea of, as you said, being a user who's passionate about it. There's a lot of great content about, that product's been around since 1978. But I don't feel anybody really captured it in the way I did, which was to go through in the most meticulous way and say, I'm just going to learn the shit out of this. Like, this is going to be like, I dedicated, I think I picked up the board like 6 months ago, and I literally worked on it every single day for 6 months until I found every little quirk. The knob goes here and it totally relaxed differently than any other thing you could do with it. But I'm tying it back to passion. Whether you're doing a YouTube video, whether you're working for a manufacturer, if you don't have that passion, it's gonna suck. Why are you doing it? Like, do something else.
It's true, and I think to me that's why I think this industry in certain ways is really very different. And in my experience, it's always been much. Yes, it's always been a job in one sense, in that, it's your livelihood, but it's always been different in the sense that I have a passion for what I do. I have a passion for these tools and what they're made for. And I think that has made it feel to me like I'm never really working. I'm just doing what I love every single day on one level or another. And I think it's great to be able to bring that.
Yeah. You go on like social media and you see somebody like take a selfie of them at the desk and just, here I am another day, 5 o'clock's rolling around. It's like, really? That's your life? That sucks. Like, do anything. Unless you really don't like your life, then I don't know. But it's like, I think there is something out there for everyone. Find it, go for it. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
you know, when my students tell me they don't want to do an assignment, I go, then you could drop out of school. I mean, that's an option. I mean, seriously, you're not as excited. I mean, I have to grade your project, and I get like 20 of them in. You know, it's like, you don't want to complete one of them, because I'm passionate about reviewing your work, because it's what I love doing. But you don't want to intentionally take 2 mics and put them out of phase so you understand really that, you know, how to work with mic alignment. Then you shouldn't be in this industry. I mean, this is like, I do this for fun. When I have spare time and my wife's not around, I'm like, she's like, what did you do today? You know, I wasn't around. Did you, you know, what'd you do? Did you go for a walk? You know, did you have a drink? No, I took 2 mics and I lined them up in front of an amp. And she's like, you've done that like 50 times. Yeah, and I'm going to keep it. Like, that's what the hell we do. You know, it's like,
It's very, very,
it's kind of nutty. Yeah, but that's what we do. And it doesn't matter what company you're with. It's like, I could talk to an acoustician. I could talk to a DSP developer. I could talk to someone making microphones. We all have that drive, or we all should at least. You know, that's what makes us enjoy each other's company.
I think so. It's a curiosity. It's an infatuation with things. To me, that's the real deal, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me close with some thoughts on where we are now as an industry and where we're going. And I'd like to hear your perspective from that of an educator,
Mm-hmm.
from that as working with a manufacturer, and as an artist.
Okay.
Whatever order you want in those, of course.
So, there's no just where are we going as an industry. That was very open.
It's
I thought
intentionally.
there was going to be like, I thought there was going to be something specific. Oh, okay.
Where
see.
are we at as an industry right now, and what are your thoughts and expectations, or hopes, dreams, thoughts and prayers? You know, whatever you got.
Yeah. Okay, I'll start from the industry, the technical day job manufacturing side. We have brilliant modeling. We have brilliant equipment. And I look at it every day, and I just think, like, is this the best? Have we finally plateaued? Have we hit the point that is the best it could get? But then I think back 10, 15 years ago, and I was like, wait, is this the best we could get? And I was like, we always see that we can take ourselves one notch better, or be one notch more innovative with our work. And I think that's what keeps us going in the industry side. It's like, you know, we see that we've gotten better. We see that, you know, now people are doing Atlas mixes, and we thought that we, you know, finally, you know, hit the peak with surround sound, or even just stereo at the time, or even just mono back in the day, you know, when we going from wax cylinders. It's like, oh my God. But we always seem to improve. And so where are we going? I don't know. But I could tell you what keeps me going is the idea that we always find innovation. And I think that's, wherever that takes us, is going to be great. I actually know a few things, but I can't say them.
Well, I just wanted to interject that, you know, when you talk about that on a technological level, of course, you know, you can quote Moore's Law. But I think there's a variation of Moore's Law that also applies to creativity and to music and everything else. You know, there's always this, you never hit that peak. You never hit that peak, because there's always more acceleration. There's more intensification. I don't think it's ever going to, at least I hope it never stops. So
No,
carry on.
Yeah. Okay, as an educator, I'll tie back to some of our old conversations we've had. I remember saying to myself, I will never buy a camera ever. And here I am.
How many have you owned?
Especially in a studio. I will never allow my own camera in a studio. And now my studio, I mean, at least a third of my work is based around video, and we're talking high-end video. Now, you're probably going to call me right after this and be like, the light kept changing in that room because of that stupid skylight. Can't you learn to control that? That's the first thing about video. And we'll talk about that later. But but my point with the video thing is, as an educator, never think you know what you're doing, ever. That's like the kiss of death. Never, ever.
Yep.
No, never say like, this is my definitive goal. Now, I have this slogan, which I got to go and read. It's, this working as a collaborative effort thing on my website. I should probably memorize that one day. I know that's going to stay consistent, but I don't know if I'm going to be doing more video. I don't know if I'm going to be doing Atmos mixes, which I'm currently really not. I'm dabbling in it. I don't know if I'm going to move to a full-fledged commercial studio, or I don't know if it's just going to be me in a bedroom making beats moving forward. I really don't know any of this, but I know I'm keeping an open mind no matter where it takes me, because it's going to change. It's going to change year to year, and every 10 years it's going to drastically change, because it always has. Or maybe I open another salon. I don't know.
Hey, you never know. But I agree with you. As an educator in particular, it's important to remain flexible. And if you don't, you're not doing a good job as an educator.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And how about
As
from
an
an artist's
artist,
perspective?
As an artist, yeah. The biggest thing is make others sound good. I could never do one style of music ever. I'm way too ADD for that. I keep all doors open, whether it's a hip hop session, electronic music session that I'm working on. I, once again, can't tell you what I'm going to be working on in a few years or what clients are going to bring to me, but, my moving forward, I know one thing is going to stay consistent. The artist I'm working with is always going to be good. I'm going to work to make them sound better, whatever trends there are in the industry, whether I like them or hate them, I'm going to explore them. I'm going to add them to my vocabulary. There's that word again. And I may never pull them out, but I'll know they're there. They'll be in the back of my mind, and they're going to influence what I do moving forward.
Well said. Todd Urban, thank you for being my guest.
Daniel, amazing. Always fun.
It has been a pleasure.
Great. Thanks a lot, man. Great talking.
Likewise. Hey, I'm Daniel Keller. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join us each week for Insights in Sound.